Ever wonder how tapping on some glass can send a message, take a picture, or maybe even get you a date? Well, today we're going to discuss that when we go over how modern smartphone displays work. Before we go into modern smartphone displays, I want to talk about past ones. Now, in the days of the Palm Pilot and early Windows phones, touchscreen displays used a technology known as resistive touch displays. Now, how this technology worked is you had a polyurethane layer, a conductive layer, and a display layer. And what it would do is, when you pushed in on the polyurethane layer, it would create a circuit with the conductive layer, and you could tell where you were touching on the screen. However, these displays, while cheap to produce and easy to engineer, have several flaws. For one, the polyurethane layer was rather fragile, so if you poked it too hard or if it got potentially knocked or torn, the phone would be ruined. Second, there was an air gap between the display and the touch layer, which caused light to get trapped between the two layers. This meant that most smartphone displays at the time could only let out about 75% of their light. Now, this meant that you either had very dim displays or you had super power-hungry bright displays. It wasn't until 2006, when LG launched the LG Prada in the UK, that we had our first example of modern touchscreen technology. The LG Prada used a display technology known as capacitive touch displays. While the LG wasn't very popular and isn't often credited with making capacitive touch technology what it is today, the next phone that came out in 2007 is arguably the one that really launched capacitive displays into the modern era. That phone was the Apple iPhone 1st Gen. To my right, we actually have a model of the Apple iPhone's 1st Gen display. Now, the first layer of that Apple's display is a liquid crystal display. This is the part that actually displays the image and was a relatively low-res display for the time. The next layer is the glass layer. Now, the glass layer exists to protect this display from the elements, because any hard pressure can easily damage the display. If you want to see what this looks like, simply take an old calculator and press in on the display. It's pretty easy to crack it. The next layer, and the part that adds the capacitive to capacitive touchscreen displays, is the driving and capacitive layer. Now, the driving capacitive layer is made out of an element known as iodine tin oxide. Now, iodine tin oxide is a very unique element. It has both a ceramic and metallic properties. It's also what makes it really good for touch displays. It's also virtually invisible when thin and is conductive. Now, how this works is a grid of iodine tin oxide is laid out on this touch substrate. And when you put your finger on it, because your finger is conductive, it creates a circuit between two or more of the conductive lines. Now, a microprocessor takes this information and notices that there is a sudden connection between these circuits. And that's how it calculates where your finger is on the display. Alright, in order for this display technology to work, we have to protect this element, since it's relatively brittle. So the next layer is a flexible protective cover. Now, this is used to protect the iodine tin oxide from the elements. And finally, a very important but often not talked about layer is the surface anti-reflective coating layer. Now, this helps eliminate some of the light trap that caused the resistive touch displays to be so dim. However, this is what the first gen iPhone looked like. Modern iPhones actually have a much different display technology. For one, they took all of this and put it inside the LCD. So on your modern iPhone, you have an LCD and you have a glass display layer. Now, that means that it almost looks like you're touching pixels whenever you're using an iPhone. Now, there are several other display technologies, such as flexible OLEDs and the new display on the Droid Turbo 2 that are very different from the iPhone display. For instance, the Droid Turbo 2 has a flexible display that's made out of plastic and is also capacitive. But because it's flexible, it's also virtually indestructible. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this explainer of how capacitive touchscreen displays work.